Hey guys, what's going on, and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be looking at patch 9.0.5 and talking about whether the changes made are enough to continue the good start that Shadowlands has had so far. So Shadowlands has been really well received. There are issues with it, but no expansion, no game is ever going to be perfect. I think they are minor changes away from creating a very, very solid expansion. And when I say minor changes, I mean there are things that obviously can always be changed, and there will be massive things that come out in the future, big game-changing mechanics. But I think right now with what they have, it's about tweaking what they have to turn it into something very good. So let's go through the patch notes and see what they've done. So the first things we're going to look at are the adventure table, and how all four covenants have just had across the table buffs. There is all of them extra damage, extra health, spell effectiveness. This means that the adventure table as a whole will just get easier and easier from now on, and that's not something we're going to be mad about. Ultimately, the adventure table is nothing but if not a chore, and just making it easier is not a bad thing. So we get into this first one, and this is something that is bugging me a little bit. Blizzard are now changing certain abilities. Things like Ashen Hollow, Wild Spirits, Abomination Limb are the ones you're going to see quite often. But Covenant abilities that have kind of big, overwhelming graphical effects and reducing them massively. After recently, in recent weeks, buffing them to make them more visible. Now, this is strange to me because why would you make something more visible to then go, we're going to make it less visible now? They are saying they're still going through iterations, which tells me that they're probably not quite happy with the way it's working right now. For me personally, give some sort of indicator, maybe an aura, like a circle around the edge of it, so we can see like the edge of the Wild Spirits or the Ashen Hollow. And therefore we know there's a line we can't cross, as opposed to the whole effect. Maybe that's a viable fix. I think at the moment they're just struggling with it though. They're also changing that your Summon Covenant abilities aren't going to hit enemies that are in combat but not necessarily in combat with you. So as an example, if you're doing your dailies and Billy over here goes and hits a mob and you go and hit your mob, there's a chance that your Covenant ability will hit both. As someone who plays Boomy quite a lot, Convoke does this all the time. It's a little bit frustrating. The fact that they've changed it is nice. Now we're starting to get into class changes, and very specifically Covenant ability class changes, I believe. So I'm going to talk through them and go briefly over the other classes. The ones I am very specifically going to focus on, things like Druid, Priest, maybe a bit of Paladin. Classes that I play quite commonly. I don't play a Death Knight, I don't play a Demon Hunter. From what I can see for a Death Knight, nothing's really changed massively. If anything, everything is a buff, which is nice to see. Abomination Limb is fantastic. And that's a huge change for PvP. Even while the Death Knight is crowd controlled, Abomination Limb will keep pulling things to him. It's a really nice change. The fact that it no longer pulls enemies that are in stealth, again, fantastic change. It doesn't need to exist. That doesn't need to be a thing. So, Demon Hunter, Unbound Chaos, which is your Fell Rush talent. I believe it started at 200% about 3 weeks ago. It's then got buffed to 300%. It's now 500. No ability needs to be buffed 500% to make it viable to play. Just stop building talents around it. It's obviously not a fun talent if you're having to just give it such high numbers that they want to play it. So Allegiant Decree has been reduced. This is good. Vengeance Demon Hunters do a lot of damage. Allegiant Decree, especially with the conduit that allows it to repeat, does some insane damage, and it just doesn't need to. It'll still do good damage. It will still probably be the go-to for Vengeance Demon Hunters for PvE. But it doesn't. It's still strong, basically. Fodder to the Flame has been completely redesigned. Again, I will leave this to people who play Demon Hunter. From what I've heard, it's still not viable. It's a cool idea, but still. The hunt has also been reduced by 10%, and Sinful Brand. Now, I've never seen a Vengeance Demon Hunter, so I can't see why that exists. Obviously, the numbers must be there if they're decreasing the damage, but hey. I've seen a couple of Night Fae Demon Hunters, certainly Vengeance Demon Hunters. They're typically Havoc players that are tanking. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going to talk too much about classes I don't know too much. So, Druid. Resto Druid is receiving a wild growth buff by 7% and rejuve buff by 12%. If they weren't viable before, they're just blanket healing is going to make them viable now. Ultimately, Druids are going to have to kick out a lot of healing now, and I'm really looking forward to healing on my Druid a little bit more. I think this is enough, honestly. I think this gives us everything. We're still not the best at burst healing and things like that. We have things like Nature's Swiftness to regrowth someone to full health. It's like a lay on hands every minute. We have our abilities to do that. Swift Men's another one. But ultimately, I think this is enough that it will just make our healing just strong enough through hots, which is really cool. Now, Necrolord's being changed. The damage and healing of the ability itself is being buffed to... or buffed by 25%. Still not going to be your highest damage ability, but it'll be nice, a little bit extra damage on a dot. And you get an extra 5% periodic damage. Now, this is buffed to 35% for Balanced Druids. Now, ultimately, I can't see that this is going to be our best Covenant, just because Convoke works so well with our Legendary and Balanced Toolkit. But it's going to be interesting. I'm sure people will try to give it a go. I play it quite a lot as Bear Tank with Adaptive Swarm, so it could be quite interesting. Going through Hunter, they've buffed Beast Mastery very, very slightly, I believe. I don't think Spitting Cobra was something you ran anyway, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I believe Venthyr is now potentially viable for Hunters, which could be quite cool. Mage, yeah, I mean, I don't really know what I'm looking at for mages or monks. Let's look at Paladin. The Holy Shock change has zero impact on Paladins. They have no mana issues, adding an extra 2% mana to Holy Shock. Oh, wow. I mean, they're just not going to make a difference, honestly. Ardent Defender's Heal, having a visual effect's really nice. Unless you had a week or to track it, it's a little bit frustrating to try and keep an eye on. But I mean, most people that care about it are going to have a week or so. It just replaces that, which is nice. Covenant abilities, Vanquisher's Hammer, Necrolord now generates 1 Holy Power. I don't think this is going to change anything, really. I think it's still going to be either Kyrian or Venthyr for Pallies. But, I mean, it gives you an option if you want to be Necrolord. They've also changed the Judgment hits in PvP, which is really, really nice. Stop these one-shots from Ret Pallies. I think Pallies are in a good place, and none of these changes are really going to make that much of a difference. Maybe Ret in PvP will sort of drop down a tier, but hey, that's their fault. They've changed Spirit Shell, which is, I mean, it's a very hard ability to use unless you're very used to playing Discipline, but it's a nice change. So I'm very aware of the time. I may split this into 2 separate videos. So, yeah. Holy increases healing taken by 4% rather than 10% for 8 seconds, and it had no stacks before. So it is a buff. It's also a buff that requires you to channel the ability more instead of just tapping it once, which is something that has been done in the past. So I can see the change for that. Okay, Shadow, I'm not quite sure what this means, actually. So I'd be interested to have a look at that. Shadow Weaving no longer benefits multiple times from damage amplifying effects. I'll have to have a look what that means. Shadowy Apparitions no longer causes targets to drop stealth. Again, as someone who plays Feral or Boomy, obviously just stealth classes, that's quite annoying at times. So, yeah, pretty nice. Now, Covenant abilities. The Night Fae Covenant for Priest has been very, very good, and they are just increasing it to do more as well. I think it's going to be something that we're going to see a lot more Priest playing. But it does take a lot of min-maxing. So, we'll see. Rogue. Assassination is looking very good, and I'm so excited to play it. So, the first thing they've changed is a new passive they've added to the game, which is Cut to the Chase. Envenom extends the duration of your Slice and Dice by up to 3 seconds per combo point spent. you're likely to be doing this with 5 or 6 combo points always. I mean, you're going to be getting 15 to 18 seconds of slice and dice at a time. That's a really big change, and I think it's something that you just can't underestimate. That's going to make a massive difference, having slice and dice just passively there all the time. Venomous Wounds now giving 1 extra energy. You'd be very surprised how big of an impact that's going to have. Ultimately, I think it's still something that we're going to appreciate. And the rest is just bug fixes, which is fine. So I know they've massively changed Serrated Bone Spike. I haven't looked into it all too much. I've heard it could be very, very good now, as well as Flagellation. Probably not how you say that, but hey, for Venthyr. I know that Rogues are looking in a really, really good spot. So next, let's have a look at Shaman. Shaman is having some major changes, especially for Elemental, and again, it's something that's very interesting and something that's convincing me that maybe I should give Elemental another go. I really enjoyed Elemental, but there were some issues with it. So the first thing they've done is across the board, Lightning Shield damage increased by 415%. Again, I talked about this in the Demon Hunter 1. If you have to buff an ability by that much, it's not a fun ability. The second part of that is Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning damage just across the board, additional 35% damage. That is huge. Something like Stormkeeper now is really going to hurt from an Elemental Shaman and things like Mythic Plus. Again, a lot of my content is based around PvE. I don't really do PvP all too much. So I think that's something that's really going to make a big difference. It's going to do a lot of damage now, and it could be quite interesting. Let's look at the Elemental specific changes. So you've got Earthshock increased by 30%, Earthquake damage increased by 70%, which is huge, and I'll talk about that in a second. Lava Beam damage increased by 35%, which is your Ascendant's Chain Lightning, which just matches the Chain Lightning buff, which is fine. And Lava Burst damage reduced by 10%. So your damage profile prior to this patch as an Elemental Shaman, Lava Burst would typically be your highest damage, with maybe Earthquake being second in a Mythic Plus, maybe the other way around if you get good Earthquakes off. I think this now is going to change that. The Earthquake, then Chain Lightning, then Lava Burst for Mythic Plus, and that's really cool. It turns us into a little bit more of an AoE profile. Still very consistent damage, and the Earthquake damage is relating to the legendary nerf, which is Echoes of the Great Sundering. That is going to make a huge difference, ultimately. Not having to do kind of all the pre-setup to get a high damage Earthquake, we're now just going to have high damage Earthquakes anyway. It just is increased further if you choose to use that legendary. It's a really nice change, and I think Elemental Shamans will start coming a little bit more prevalent in the meta now, which is a massive thing. I'm so happy for that. Enhancement, Lava Lash damage increased by 40%, which is nice because it felt like hitting something with a wet noodle. Stormkeeper increases the damage of Chain Lightning by 300%. Again, it's going to be very, very nice for Mythic Plus, especially with this Chain Lightning damage here. Bearing in mind, you work that into the original damage, and then you buff it all by 300%, so it's multiplicative. Very, very nice. Sorry, I am actually a little bit ill at the moment, so I'm kind of choking over my own words. Stormring can now correctly trigger... Okay, they're just bug fixes, which is nice. So... Again, a couple of Covenant abilities buffed. Vesper Totem, it was actually already quite a viable option. It was just not fun to play. All they've done is increase the numbers. It's still not going to be fun to play. Fade Transfusion, damage increased. And they've buffed the healing from damage to conversion and the heal radius. It might make it a little bit better. Actually, I was Night Fae for a little while. It's interesting, but hey, it's not something I'm going to rush back to play. Primordial Wave, Enhancement Lightning Bolt effect now deals 150% damage. I still think this isn't going to be something that works. At the moment, I tried it with Primordial Wave on Enhancement and Stormkeeper, with the original Lightning Bolt being 150%. It wasn't very good then. I can't see how this would make it any different. The Chain Harvest damage and healing increase for Elemental and Restoration Shamans. They couldn't buff it for Enhancement because of Maelstrom Weapon. It's just too strong. And it'll light up. Woohoo! It doesn't make a difference. So Warlocks. Warlocks are an interesting one at the moment because they're getting buffed, nerfed, and changed all around the place. I'm going to quickly go through this now. I'm very conscious of the time, and we've only got Warlocks and Warriors left anyway. Curse of Tongues, it's nice. It's irrelevant, really. Affliction. the Seed of Corruption bug I've had happen to me if you get CC'd in like miss on the villager. Sometimes Seed of Corruption won't apply corruption, which is weird, but hey. Demonology, that is a huge change. The summon Dreadstalkers and all your pets now listen to primary pet commands. It means we're going to have to macro pet attack into things, but I'm just going to do that into Hand of Gul'dan, and it's worked really well. They've changed the cool Dreadstalkers, and from the Shadows buff, now it's not going to affect your Tyrant, or currently isn't going to affect your Tyrant, but they've buffed this enough that it's probably going to be a default run in Mythic Plus, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's a very simple playstyle. It's about getting your dogs to hit as many targets as you can with a debuff, and exploding as many imps as possible. Very fun to play. I've really, really enjoyed it, and actually, it's just a 10% buff all round, pretty much. This is irrelevant. No Destruction Warlock in the world uses corruption. Why they've done this, I do not know. Covenant abilities, Scaring Teeth is, I mean, that's a very minor quality of life nerf, I guess. Decimating Bolt, bonus damage from the target's missing health increased to 100%. So if you get something very low and then use Decimating Bolt, it's going to do a lot of damage. It's pretty cool. And I mean, Necrolord is already something that's viable for a lot of Warlocks, so that could be quite fun. Impending Catastrophe. I wish this was viable. It's such a fun ability, and it put curses on everything, and it looks and feels so good. But it's just not viable. Even with this, it's just not viable. Warriors. The Fury buff is just an issue, yeah. I mean, yeah. Protection. Damage of all abilities increased by 10%, and damage of Thunderclap increased by an additional 10%. Now, this is a pretty cool change, just to help Protection Warriors keep aggro, but I've seen Protection Warriors kick out crazy amounts of damage already, and it feels like they're trying to turn them back into the gladiator tanks, rather than being the ones soaking all the damage. They're kicking out a lot of damage instead. It could be that if you can get the survivability issues fixed on a Protection Warrior, they're actually going to be able to kick out Vengeance Demon Hunter's level of damage now, especially since Vengeance Demon Hunter has also been nerfed. So maybe that could be quite interesting. Now, Covenant abilities. This is probably the biggest Covenant ability change in 9.0.5, and it happens on the Warrior. The Necrolord banner has been redesigned. Brandish the Conqueror's banner, granting 400 mastery and 30% increased movement speed to you and your nearest two allies. That is huge. Like, you I can't exaggerate enough how big this could potentially be. 400 mastery is like a trinket proc. And you go and put that on a Fire Mage or a Boomkin or a Hunter or whoever, they're going to just kick out even bigger levels of damage. And we're already seeing this very funnel meta right now, where groups are using a Dish Priest, a Fire Mage, a monk to give the buff. All these sort of little damage increases to allow mages to kick out crazy amounts of damage, and warriors are just going to have to give them an extra 400 mastery. This is something I really like, if they can do it well. I feel like this is something that isn't going to be well received, turning warriors into a bit of a support, but it's strong, and hey, if it works, I'm all for it. So guys, I'm actually going to stop this video here and start a new one in a second. This is just going to go through the class changes. Overall, the class changes are a good, positive thing. They haven't broken anything, and they've just buffed other things. They're increasing the viability of different classes and specs, and that's a good thing. So guys, let me know what you think, and apart from that, thanks for watching. Catch you later. Goodbye.